What's up guys, Sam here, welcome back to the Juice Box. In today's video we're going to be talking about this guy, a solar disconnect or PV array disconnect breaker, why you need one and how to install it. So what we're going to be doing today in the Juice Box is installing my PV array or my solar disconnect breaker. This is a box that is going to be installed inside the Juice Box. While the enclosure that I purchased does say it has some sort of weather rating and waterproofness, I'm not going to trust it to be outside. Right now with the Juice Box, my solar array consists of one panel outside and a very low-key, low budget friendly design. Right now at least, because we're just getting started. So a disconnect box basically is a heavy duty light switch or a breaker. Well, okay, literally this is a breaker. What it does is it breaks the wire connection from your incoming to your outgoing. In this application, my incoming source is going to be from my solar panels. They're coming into the top. They're bringing electricity, juice, into the Juice Box. I want to have a disconnect not only because it's largely required in most installations, it is a safe and best practice to do, but also to allow me to change out my components inside the Juice Box without having to go out and physically disconnect my solar array. That is the number one thing for me: convenience, safety, and also a little bit of requirement sauce sprinkled on top. So here's a look at the kit that I purchased, and as always there will be a link to this and other things I use in the Juice Box down below if you want to check them out, purchase, or just learn more about it from the manufacturer. So this kit came with a box, the actual enclosure itself. It has a DIN rail, which is what the breakers mount to, and then this one has wire thimbles or pass-throughs on the top and bottom that tighten down and are supposed to give a water-resistant seal. I'm not going to be installing this outdoor in a wet environment, but I think it is somewhat water resistant, although check with the manufacturer and make sure if you plan on installing one outdoors, and make sure you get a good quality one for that. The breaker that came with this kit is a 100 amp 500 volt breaker. It is absolutely overkill for my solar array, but it is one that should last me and be a little bit of future proof. The biggest thing you want to make sure is when you get your disconnect, either know what PV system you're going to have, know what your voltages and your amperages are going to be, or if you're like me, just go big. But always make sure you keep in mind this breaker rating. If you go to upgrade your PV system in the future, make sure you don't overload the breaker because you'll have problems there. As far as installing the breakers, these are really straightforward. You see a metal rail in this box, but unlike most in the America electric panels, you'll have metal rails that are bonded to the metal case. That does not do anything electrically. It doesn't bond. All of your connections happen with the breaker on the top and the bottom, and the metal rail in the box is just to hold the breaker in place. On the back side of the breaker, you see it has hooks on the top and then these little tabs on the bottom. You hook it over top of the rail, you push those in, and it locks into place on the rail. It's a really cool system. This style breaker, I believe, is more common in international markets, but over here in the US, it is not as common for what we see in residential uses. But this is a really cool breaker, and I kind of like this system more. So to install it, I just hook it over that top rail. It is right there hooking left and right. It can slide. I'll reach in here to the bottom, pop those two clips, and she's locked in place. So the cover that comes with the kit is pre-fitted for this breaker, but does have some slots you can punch out if you want to expand this box. Otherwise, you attach it down, and it's got a little door, keeps it nice and closed, and otherwise is a pretty neat little package. I have here another disconnect box. This is a larger one, but the design and principles are still the same. You see two different breakers in here. This was used as a 2-in-1 box where the left breaker disconnected my battery bank and the right breaker disconnected my solar array. This is just a larger box. The same kind of technology applies. You want to check your breaker sizing for your solar array or your battery bank, and otherwise they install, clip in, and do everything identical. Just know that there are larger boxes you can get if you want a more complex system, or if you don't want to lock yourself in. Thinking ahead to the future, you might want a larger one. They do come in several different sizes. I'm going to be installing this disconnect box on my French cleat panel. This is not how I would recommend installing it in a permanent installation. This panel is really designed for juice box video usage and not something I would recommend you do in your home. I would rather see you put it on a backer board, say 1/2-inch plywood like I've got here, and attach it and not have it movable or easily changed around. I do this here in the juice box because this is a channel. This is kind of more of a studio setup, and it allows me to move it around, swap it out, and change my configurations without destroying the walls, and kind of gives an easier way to present stuff to you guys. There we go. For juice box purposes, that is great, but remember, it's not what I would suggest doing. Alright, the next thing for me to do is bring my wires from my solar array, not connected to the solar panels outside, just the wires running into the building, and go ahead and run them through these thimbles in the box, down, then I will strip the ends and connect it to the breaker. This breaker has positive on the right side, negative on the left side, so I'm going to be careful to make sure I do connect it correctly. I don't know that there is a really hardcore reason for it to be one side or the other. If you know, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I'm just going to match the labels here so there's no confusion should anyone ever come to see this, or me in the future when I forget what I've done. I don't confuse myself. That's probably the #1 reason. Let's keep it simple for Sam in the future. I have a small solar array, so I'm using 10 gauge wire. So I'm going to strip off the ends just a little bit here, enough to feed into the breaker without leaving too much exposed to make it unsafe. I'm going to give the wires just a little twist here to make sure they look nice on their connections, and then I'll fit this wire into the top, and then using a Phillips screwdriver, tighten the clamp down on the breaker onto the wires securely. Do you guys see how frustrating this is? Yeah, I regret doing the French cleat already, but I think it will make sense in the long term for the channel. But yeah, if you're doing this, don't copy this. This is terrible. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and clamp the breaker onto the DIN rail, onto its rail here. Slide it roughly towards the middle. Pop that clip on the right, left on the bottom, and now I'm going to tighten down my wire clamps. Keep things nice and snug, and we are literally halfway done with this. Alright, my next step is to insert the wires that are leaving the box, feed them up into the breaker, and clamp them down on the bottom. Now I'll tighten up the wire nuts, or the little thimbles. Guys, we're done wiring. It's that simple. You really are just connecting 2 wires together on the top and the bottom, putting the breaker in place, and honestly the most annoying part of this install is the fact that I'm using the French cleat. Otherwise, it is very straightforward. At this point, I'm going to put the cover on, and then we can get our multimeter out. We can check that it does disconnect when we expect it to be disconnected, and then once we hook our solar panels up outside, come back in, flip the breaker on, check voltages, and we'll call it good to go. Alright guys, the solar panels are connected outside. I've got my multimeter turned on here. Let's go ahead and put the leads on the other ends of these wires. Nothing, which is good. We'll go ahead and flip this breaker up. Now we'll check our voltages. 29.4. That's good. I only have one solar panel out there on my solar array. Can you call it a solar array with only one panel? I don't know, I guess I will. I only have one panel out there for now, but hey, this disconnect box does work. This does give me a safe and correct method of disconnecting my incoming power so that I can do something with these ends, which is install a charge controller, which will be covered in the next video here on the Juice Box. If you've got any questions about this disconnect box, anything I did not cover, or if you have suggestions other than ditch the French cleat, I'm all ears. Also, if you enjoy this kind of content about solar power, DIY solutions, off-grid technology, energy storage, and product reviews relating around that stuff, you might want to subscribe and stick around, because that is what the juice box is all about. Appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll see you guys on the next one where we connect this to a charge controller. For now, we'll leave it there. Have a good night.